So, hello and welcome to today's Info2Go webinar. My name is Annie Gaines and I am the Continuing Education Consultant here at the Idaho Commission for Libraries, located in sunny but somehow snowy Boise, Idaho. Our webinars and other continuing education opportunities are funded by the Institute of Museum and Library Services. Everyone is muted and we encourage you to use the chat feature to ask questions and discuss with other attendees. As you exit the webinar, you will be prompted to complete an evaluation. And as always, we appreciate your honest feedback. Today's topic is the library as a gallery space. And our presenters today are Ross Sempek from the College of Southern Idaho Library and Dulce Kirsting-Lark from the University of Idaho Library. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Annie. It's really nice to be here. I'd like to start by thanking you, Annie, for putting this on. I really appreciate you reaching out and allowing us this opportunity to share our work we're doing here. And I'd also like to thank the Idaho Commission for Libraries for all the wonderful work they do. I'm still kind of a newbie here in Idaho, and they've been so helpful in sort of getting my sea legs with the library community here. So it's fantastic. So I certainly appreciate everything that y'all have done. So a little bit about me. I'm from the College of Southern Idaho. I wear many hats. I do programming, outreach, marketing, design, and displays. And I'm also an artist in real life. And so I feel like this gallery project has sort of utilized all my responsibilities and my passions to coalesce into something really, really fun. So why I'm here today is to tell you about my journey turning the CSI library into a gallery space, from its inception to its successes, its missteps, and future. I hope you can learn something from my story and perhaps find some inspiration, some artistic inspiration to do something similar in your library. And so I'll start by kind of just start at the beginning. Our original plan, every time I was walking around the library, I would see this large blank wall, which is partly what you can see behind me. This is part of the gallery. There's nothing there. And as an artist, when I see a blank wall, I just want to decorate it. It's an immediate impulse of mine. And so the grand idea was to have a mural. I was like, a mural would be so cool. It'd be large, in your face, amazing. We can make it CSI themed. It'd be sweet. You know, we have maybe use students to paint it. I have a coworker who's a graffiti artist. We could do something like that. But logistics were just too complex. It would take a long time. It'd be really messy. It'd be really smelly. It would disrupt, library operations. So I think the next best thing was to do a gallery. And so I started going down that road and sort of arrived at where we are at now. And yeah, I thought it'd be great to dress up the space and make it look really nice, very beautiful. And we could also solicit artwork from patrons, students, faculty. And in this way, we could let the patrons see themselves in the library in a really meaningful way. So yeah, that was the idea. So I'll tell you about how it began. So we talked with the director about the gallery idea. She was down for it. And I also wanted to involve the art department. I felt like that was kind of an organic outreach effort. We got pre-existing artists here on campus, and so I figured it would be really nice to reach out to these folks. So originally I brought in 3 professors, showed them the space, showed them what we wanted to do. Kind of wanted to get buy-in from those folks before we started, and they were really excited about the project. And so that was an essential component. But the director was really worried about potential damage that might happen to the artwork. And so a condition of starting this gallery was that we would create a liability waiver for the artwork. We would just wanted to communicate that it might get damaged when we hang it. It might get damaged while it's still hanging. And so we just wanted to acknowledge that, let the artists know about that, and communicate that to them. And so I drafted a release waiver, shared it with the faculty, shared it with the director, ultimately got a final approval. And then, yeah, we moved on from there. And so the idea was to, after we got the liability waiver drafted, to solicit artwork from folks on campus. And so it seems obvious now, but we didn't start with like an email campaign. We didn't just email everybody on campus. What I did was I thought I would do sort of outreach by proxy. I would use the art professors to talk to their students. We have built-in artists right there, and see if they were interested. They would promote it, and if they were interested, they would hand out these liability waivers. They would sign it, contact me and share their artwork and see what we can do. So a lot of moving parts, but I was kind of just, going along with what the plan was. And so I also hung some like framed little posters on the wall that said your artwork here and my contact information below, along with liability waiver hanging right there as well. Unfortunately, this approach was unsuccessful. We didn't get any interest expressed in this project, either from the professors or from the stuff on the wall. And so at this point, I realized I needed to sort of change my approach because I knew that it could be successful, but we just had to do the right things in order to make it so. And so this is when my relationship development with these folks really came into play. So I already had some contacts with the art department, and I had contact with the director of the museum we have here on campus, and that was really essential. And I would see these folks outside of this project. I had worked with the museum director to get some artifacts in the library to show, and we would see each other monthly at unrelated committee meetings. And so when the liability waiver fell through, I was like, oh, well, I should just ask the museum director. He's in charge of a gallery space and putting on shows and this and that. And so I said, hey, like, do you guys require liability waivers for hanging artwork? And he kind of looked at me quizzically and said, no, we never do that. I was like, okay, so this is not standard practice. That's good to know. So from there, we kind of scrapped the liability waiver and yeah, at this point, we sent out a campus-wide email to say, hey, we're starting a gallery here on campus. Anybody who's interested, contact me and send me your artwork. And so this was a lot more successful. We got a lot of responses. 10 artists in total sent me some artwork. We had a handful more who had interest in showing, but kind of never got past the first couple emails, which is fine. But yeah, it was great. So for my first go at this, it was pretty excellent. And so this led into then the process of selecting artwork. And so there were a couple parameters that I wanted to follow. The first, and I think most important, was for this project to be inclusive, open, and accessible to our patron base, because for a few reasons. Because this is sort of reflects the values of librarianship as a whole, right? We want to include as many people as possible. We want library to be accessible. We want to remove barriers to access. And so we wanted to fall in line with those values. Second part was that I wanted this to be successful. So I didn't want to, be a hoity-toity art critic and say like, ooh, be too stringent on like qualification, right? Or like the quality aspects of the artwork. Obviously I didn't want to put up, something too simple or not involved like a stick figure or something like that. But if you had some artwork, you put some time into it, I would accept it. It really didn't matter what it looked like. The other parameter was content and the imagery. And so we basically wanted stuff safe for work. We didn't want anything too controversial, no nudity or politics or anything like that, and nothing overtly, offensive. And so as an artist, like I knew that this kind of goes against some of the spirit of creativity and having open expression, but it's a different venue. And so people can't necessarily choose to see or not see the work that's on the wall. So we definitely need to make sure that it's agreeable. And so this wasn't a huge issue with the artists. A lot of them had really great work that fell within these parameters. And there's so much you can do with artwork that isn't, sort of envelope pushing in that sense. And so this turned out to be totally fine. And so, yeah, so I'd like to show you the gallery. This is sort of what we came up with. It was neat. We saw some stuff that folks submitted from the artwork that they did in class. And so on the left here, we have a nice little still life of a dog statue. We had some black and white photographs of the canyon, kind of get some really nice values and shapes and lines in there, some really cool compositions. We had artists submit their personal stuff, some fun stuff with combining canvases to make a full image, and it looks like they did a still life of like a corkboard they had in their room. Some really fun, cool renderings. So that is part of it. This is the sign for the gallery as you come in. I kind of wanted to make a nice grand sign so it would communicates an air of importance for this gallery, as well as make it fancy. You know what you're looking at. It's not just a bunch of random pictures on the wall. This is a dedicated gallery space. And this was cost-free as far as like reaching out to get things. I just made this with printer paper and cardstock, found a nice font, and spaced out the letters myself, and used a level to pin it up. And I think it looks really nice. And so, yeah, below we have some more artwork, some really cool pen work. And I like these photos because they are, well, not only are they pretty, but they're of foliage, fall foliage here on campus. And so it kind of hopefully encourages people to look at what's around them with a new eye, to see the beauty around them everywhere, not just in traditionally beautiful things. We got some really good work from some employees. This was a photograph taken at a Yellowstone wolf, I guess, refuge or place like that. Pretty fantastic. In fact, this photo is going up in the president's office after it comes off of the wall. So it's very popular. And I really like this photo or this painting on the right. Really great values, colors, excellent rendering, kind of a fun, mysterious image. And so, yeah, just really excited at all the stuff we got. I had no idea what to expect, and we got some really great imagery. And this last one you can see behind me, some really fun stuff. We got a frog dressing up as a clown, sitting on a log in the middle of the field. Like, I was just kind of blown away by the creativity of this image. The monsters wrestling in water kind of reminded me of an old school video game. And the same artist who did this did the one on the right, a really fun kind of surreal interpretation of the canyon and the river and whatnot. And then it's another employee right here in the middle who did a nice pen and ink rendering of, I think it's a jaguar, a cat nonetheless. But yeah, got a really great range of talents, of abilities, of imagery, and I only hope we can get some more. So this was great, right? I had the idea to create a gallery. It was successful. We got stuff on the wall. People can see it. It's fantastic. But in library land, and I guess everywhere else, you got to promote the stuff to let people know about it. And so originally I had just sort of talked to the artist about sharing it on social media. Either got like a verbal or written agreement through email, and this was fine. And I think, well, at this point, I didn't really make any copyright considerations because A, didn't occur to me, and B, I think with social media, at least, it's so ubiquitous, it's so worldwide, it's so well known that if you tell people that you'd like to share it, they understand the implications of what that means. It can be shared by people, and it's going to be accessible worldwide. And most people are okay with that as long as it's properly attributed, and it gets their name out there, it gets their image out there. It's good for both parties. But beyond this, I was talking with my open education resources librarian, and it was nice because he said, I love this project, this is great, and it would be cool to share it on an online gallery like omeka.com or even like the Digital Library of Idaho. And so, yeah, I said, like, I love this is great. And he's like, okay, cool. So do you have like a donor agreement with them? I said, donor agreement? I don't know about any sort of thing like this. And so he said, yeah, well, it would be ideal if we had full ownership of copyright to their image. And so this kind of blew me away. I didn't really realize that this was like best practices for what he wanted to do. And so, I'm an artist. I understand how precious these images are to the artists themselves. They're unique. They're one of a kind. They put a lot of heart and soul into these things. And so asking for ownership of their images seems like kind of a stretch for me. So there were a lot of copyright considerations with that. I eventually drafted a copyright form for the artists to say, like, here, basically, I wanted to come from like a place of respect. Like, I respect your imagery. I respect what you did, all the work you did to make this, and the fact that you're willing to share it with me. But if we would like to do what we want to do, ideally, here are the copyright implications of what's in store. And so, obviously they have the opportunity to completely deny sharing an image with us. But if they did, we said, like, okay, there are a few levels of, let's see if I can share this here. The copyright form that we came up with. Oops. Oh, there it is. Yeah, fantastic. So basically said, oops. Here's where we were going to share it. Some websites, this and that. And then we basically gave them like a range of Creative Commons licenses that they could give us access to. So for commercial use, for non-commercial use, for sharing, remixing, all this stuff. And this was sort of successful. I emailed it to all the artists. I only got a response from half of them, and the ones I got responses from didn't necessarily fill it out correctly. So some confusion, and doing this whole gallery thing was sort of like building an airplane mid-flight, because there were considerations that I should have made from the get-go that I didn't, and that I sort of had to kind of push into the back end of the project. And I think that was a big drawback. If I think I'd made all these considerations from the start, it wouldn't have seemed so, I guess, out of the blue. They would have understood what they're getting into before they give us their imagery and all that stuff. Plus, again, the ask of saying, hey, can we own copyright to your images is pretty big, even though it doesn't disallow them from continuing to use their image in any way they see fit, making money off of it, all this stuff. It's just sort of a little hard to give over responsibility for how it's used to somebody else when there's a very thin relationship there. It was a good one, but it's not necessarily deep. So they kind of have to take a leap of faith with the trust and what we're going to do with their imagery, even though we're a library and we're awesome, right? But and then again, forums come back to sort of bite me. I'm trying to get rid of those with a liability waiver, and then I come back in with this really complex library talk about copyright. And so yeah, that wasn't so great. So certainly it's nice to learn from this experience, and moving forward, hopefully we can do a little better in this arena. So let's see, I'd like to talk about our future efforts here. I would love to switch out the artwork at the end of the semester, which is the beginning of May. And then I reach out to the artists saying like, hey, we would love to get some new artwork up on the walls. If you have anything else that you would love to show and share with us, I would love to see that, and we'll put it up. So it's nice that I already have a pre-existing base of artists that I can solicit for artwork. And then hopefully if we get some new students in the fall, we can send out another email and more folks will be interested. And I was talking to my director about this, and she was a little surprised, like thinking about the parameters, or at least the form of having a gallery. I think a little too stuck on the idea of like how a gallery operates. So they'll have a show, they'll take it down, and then put up new artwork, right? And so, but we're making our own gallery. We don't necessarily have to operate within those parameters. So she was saying, oh, I think it'd be cool to at least have artwork up on the wall, fill it up, and then rotate out old artwork once new artwork comes in. And I think that's maybe a better approach. It's better to have it than to have a blank wall, which is what we started with and we really don't want. So I think I don't want to go back on that, because I've already contacted all of the artists about taking stuff down, but I think moving forward, that would be a really nice format just to ensure that we have stuff to show. And so, yeah, I'd also like to do some in-person outreach, to maybe go out to the art classes themselves to put a face to the name, say that, tell them about what we want to do with our artwork. I'm not sure beyond that what I would do, because I've done some outreach to classes, but it's all about using our library website in the database. And so I think it'd be a little weird for me to just go like, hey, I'm Ross, we would like to have your artwork, and then leave like after 2 minutes. So I think I'm gonna have to figure out something a little more substantial for that. And then, I mean, we already have a gallery on campus, so I think it'd be good to collaborate with them, see what we can do about maybe sharing a show, getting some more acumen, or maybe even soliciting some artwork from folks who have shown in the gallery before. I think that would be nice. I think it'd also be really nice to hold a reception. It would kind of make everything feel kind of fancy, like it was an actual event, and it would hopefully bring people into the library, and then we can showcase sort of what we have, and then even make more contacts through doing that. Like, ostensibly people are coming to a reception to look at art, they're interested in art, or they're artists themselves, and so I think that would be a really nice networking opportunity for me. Yeah, I've also been talking to folks recently who express interest, or who I know are in the art program. I'll give them my email, give them my card, and we have some work study students who are artists as well. And so I think that would be a really good way to do that. It's kind of nice for me working in the academic setting, is that like we have I don't know, like a captive audience of sorts, right? We have a pre-existing patron base that is here all the time. And so it might be a little hard to translate this into like a public library setting, but I certainly think it's doable, especially if you have like a list of folks that you can email. They've opted into like notifications and stuff like that. And yeah, I think you'll be surprised at how many creative folks there are out there. Yeah, it'd be really nice to make them a part of your library, even if it's a temporary space. I think this is a really fun project. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed hearing about my library gallery story, my successes, my missteps, and everything in between. I think starting a gallery space in your library will ultimately improve the look of your space, and it has the added potential of allowing a venue for patrons to see themselves in the library, which strengthens relationships, and I think really creates lifelong patrons of your services, and yeah, just adds another layer to that relationship that you really want to cultivate. And so yeah, if you have any questions, I'd certainly be willing to answer them now or later. I can send out contact information and all that, but yeah, appreciate you guys' time. And then I'll leave it to my wonderful partner Dulcie. She's going to talk about her digital galleries.
Ross, since you're already driving the presentation, would you mind doing that for me?
Not at all. Not
Okay,
at all.
thank you so much.
Oh yeah, so physical space to digital space. This is the expert right here.
Hi, everybody. My name's Dulcie Kirsting Lark, and I'm the head of special collections and archives at the University of Idaho Library. We maintain what I would argue is the largest archive in the state of Idaho, and have been doing digital presentations, digital galleries of some of that material for quite a long time. So when Ross reached out asking if I wanted to co-present, I thought it would be a really fun opportunity. I will also say, if at the end when we have some time for questions, before I came to the University of Idaho Library, I was actually the executive director of a historical society, which had a historic house museum. So I also have quite a bit of experience doing physical shows. And so a lot of the things that Ross was talking about made me smile because they're all things I did too. So I think having some ability to laugh at the things that didn't go well is really essential, but anybody who works in libraries, I'm sure, knows that already. So yeah, the University of Idaho has a pretty robust digital collections platform, and we have quite a few digital collections up. If you've never spent some time on the University of Idaho Library's website, I really encourage you to take a look at our digital collections. But sort of why digital galleries, why make the investment in them? Certainly it increases access to materials. So accessibility is something that we're all really focused on. And there's like sort of the real baseline access, right? That people who can't physically come to your space because they live someplace else, because physically they just can't get to it, being able to have access to it online does a lot. There are other tools that you can use. Thanks for sharing that, Annie. There are other tools that also you can apply to digital spaces that are sort of augmenting what you might be able to do in a physical space. So having like alternative text on images or artwork so that people who are low vision are able to still have a way to interact with the pieces. That's something that a digital platform might be able to provide you. It's also something to think about even as you're developing a physical space. Is there a way that you could overlay some digital content on top of it through QR codes or some other platform to assist people who are low vision, who have some other accessibility need? Also, through digital galleries, it's probably the cheapest way to make connections with materials outside your institution. So in physical spaces, you can certainly get items loaned to you if you want to augment some sort of exhibit or display. You might be able to reach out to, I'm always going to advocate for your local historical society or preservation organization. They usually have some great material that they love people to be exposed to. But other museums in your area, other lending institutions, you might reach out to them to see if there are materials that might augment whatever sort of display you're doing. And in a digital space, that's even easier. It's just asking for permission, right, to collaborate or to make connections. And I think Ross in a few slides earlier said something about the Digital Library of Idaho, and that is a platform that's continuing to grow. And it's a way that across Idaho, we can make connections to the digital materials. We're a big state, and folks who are in Southeast Idaho can't necessarily get up to North Idaho, but it doesn't mean that they don't want to interact with some of the material. Finally, digital humanities is really a growing field of student interest and in professional development. And so being able to develop digital galleries in collaboration with students or even faculty is a really cool way to grow learning outcomes for those folks. And I would argue it's even an opportunity in a non-academic setting like a public library where you might be able to have workshops on building digital exhibits. Those sorts of skills are super valuable. Digital humanities, how do you translate material into a dynamic web presence? More and more, we all sort of need to have those skills in the information industry. So if you want to go to the next slide, Ross, thank you. So the University of Idaho Library has been creating digital collections since at least the mid 2000s, late 2000s. It sort of started because in 2007, we had this international jazz collection. If you're not familiar, the University of Idaho has held a jazz festival for decades. It's called the Lionel Hampton Jazz Festival. And one component of that was this archive of jazz material that's really valuable, sort of surprising that it's at the University of Idaho, but gets used a lot. And in 2007, it was an independent sort of archive managed by the folks who managed the Jazz Festival. And they, I would argue, rightfully decided that maybe it would be best held by the university's archives because of the nature of the material and running dual systems. In a large institution, there's a lot of collections spread out, and the more we can unify, it makes it easier for our patrons, right? So we took on the jazz collection, and at that time, we received a pretty large competitive national grant to digitize that collection, to make a lot of it available online because it is such unique material and because Idaho is not inherently a destination for folks who are interested in jazz research. So we wanted to make that available, and that really kickstarted what we call our digital initiatives program. And that's a division within our library that does a whole bunch of cool stuff, but they also are really integral to the development of our digital collections. If you could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So between late 2000s to today, we've had an iteration of platforms that we host these on. And I tell you this not to like sway you on one particular form or another, only to say that just like there are sort of ongoing issues with maintaining a physical gallery, there are ongoing issues with maintaining a digital gallery. So going in, understanding the long-term implications of doing something like this is really important, and making sure that you have the support of others in your institution to be devoting resources to this. Even if it's not monetary, all of our time is valuable. So like a lot of places, we started with Content DM. We still rely on Content DM for hosting individual items, more or less. We were able to use some of the skills within our library faculty to have some customizations to Content DM and sort of put an additional layer over top to make it look sort of special. But I don't know, 5, 6-ish years ago, actually a team internal to our library using static web technology, using GitHub as a platform, they developed this thing called Collection Builder, which is an open source tool. And I have the link for it at the end. If you're interested, it is the one thing I'm going to tell you I'm pretty I do really recommend, which is it is a way to build a digital collection and then not have to worry about constant maintaining of it. So as somebody who used to manage a website for a small cultural institution, you can't just like put a website up, right, and then hope that it stays forever. You have to do a lot of maintenance on it. And so if you can find a static web platform, it helps with that ongoing maintenance. It's also free, again, as free as anything is when you have to put time into it. So on the left side of your screen, you see sort of our original content DM platform. And then on the right side of your screen, you see how it's sort of transformed. And if you were to go in and try to navigate the two different versions, so the International Jazz Collection is still built on this older platform. It still looks that way. You would be able to kind of tell the difference, whereas like the Ella Fitzgerald collection is a more recent one that we've put up, and it's in the collection builder format. It's just easier to navigate. It's a little bit more pleasant to look at. If you want to go to the next slide. So as I was saying, choosing a system that's customizable, that's easy to learn, other values that your institution might have, if money is a consideration, what is there a subscription for it? Is there a way that it interfaces with whatever catalog you're already using? We, like a lot of libraries, I bet, have multiple systems running all the time, and it can be a challenge to make sure we're not duplicating our work all the time by having to create separate indexes for materials that are already cataloged someplace else. So that's another consideration. And then we, at least in our library, have this designation between what is a digital collection and what is a digital exhibit. And I think this applies both to your physical gallery as well as to digital ones, which is you have to make a decision whether you are putting material up with no interpretive context, or if you want it to be more like a museum exhibit. And when I say museum, I mean history museum. When Ross talks, I think he means an art museum, and they are different. But if you want more of a context, like a history museum where you've got like interpretive panels, text panels that are going along with it, and you're trying to create a narrative out of multiple pieces, rather than maybe allowing the viewer to really take what they want from the display that you've put up. So understanding a collection or display versus an exhibit and making the choice, I think that will save you some headache later on determining what is your goal. So before you do anything, I really encourage folks to just say, like, why are we doing it? What is our goal? Is our goal to have an aesthetically pleasing location? The white wall is not doing us any good. We just want people to feel like we're in a more creative space when they're here. So that is our goal. That is our number one goal. Or is it, we have this collection of artwork that was donated to us, and we want people to know that it's here. And we want people to have a learning outcome from it. We want them to then be driven to use other materials that are in our collection. So knowing what the why is really essential and can help you determine where you should be investing your time. And then lastly, the ongoing maintenance, anything just like determining if you're going to switch out at the end of the semester in a physical space, in a digital space, you have to think about, will these be out here forever? I mean, everything on the internet technically is there forever if it's captured by Archive It, right? But, or the Internet Archive. But are you going to put things up and then maybe take them down? Are you just perpetually adding new digital exhibits and displays and collections? All questions that you should try to maybe pencil out ahead of time, or else be prepared to think through it while you're in the process. So again, the image on the left is sort of an older version that we were using for some digital exhibit type work. That was actually just Tumblr. So we started investing time in Tumblr, and then we realized, man, we don't really have control of Tumblr. We can't gather good metrics on who's viewing it. We can't really control if it stays or goes. Like, Tumblr could close one day. I don't know. So we migrated over to a homegrown blog, basically the Idaho Harvester, which takes you can see it was the same name. We called it the Idaho Harvester channel on Tumblr. And then we transitioned, and this is also built on the Collection Builder platform, this Idaho Harvester blog. So if you want to go to the next slide. So things that we've learned, not all collections are good candidates for online display. What we have largely done in our digital collections has been to take material already in our institutional repository, in our special collections and archives, and a lot of libraries, whether they're academic or public, maintain some sort of like local history collection, right? You are a place that people trust, and so they bring you historic photos. They bring you original books, limited self-published books about local history, that sort of stuff. we've taken that material to largely build our digital collections, not entirely. You will find some that are more community collaborations. And we've had to take some down because people have said, like, I don't really want this on the internet. I don't think it's appropriate. One such collection was, and this was many years ago, so I can say it was before my time and not my fault. But there was a collection of photography of local Indigenous people. And it was not of their own making. And we didn't really consult before we made it into a digital collection. We just thought, oh, well, this is interesting material. We should make it available to people more easily. And we were asked to take it down by a local tribe, and we did so, So understanding and maybe thinking through the difference between holding something in a repository where people have to make the effort to go, like, come to you, get it, request the material, versus like they can find it at 2 a.m. in their pajamas in their house. Most legacy collections do not have good donation forms to have foreseen what the internet was going to be. I mean, we've got stuff that was donated to us in the 50s, 60s, 70s. There was no idea what this might look like in the future. So being willing to take things down, maybe thinking ahead at are there parties that we should be asking before we do this, even if they don't technically own it. Asking, I'm usually a person who acts and then asks for forgiveness because I like to get stuff done, but there are occasions when you should really ask first. The public is great at finding and pointing out inaccuracies. The people who this material matters the most to, and I'm talking now mostly about historical displays, the people that this matters the most to will tell you when you have somebody labeled as Joe and it should be James. They will tell you if you have it labeled as Wallace and really it's Kellogg, right? So having a sort of prepared ability to say, like, thank you so much. We obviously didn't intend to make this inaccurate information, and we are correcting our record, and then truly correcting the record. That's the other thing, is like going through the effort of updating your collection, and not just saying, well, we've marked it down, because they'll be upset if you haven't corrected it in a timely fashion. Ross started to get into this. Copyright. Copyright is probably purposefully complicated. Copyright law is complicated. I've taken day-long seminars and left knowing less than what I came in with, I think. But in an educational setting, fair use provides quite a bit of protection. If you're not trying to monetize this in some way, and you're not providing a copy that is comparable to what the original person might have sold, then by and large, you are probably okay under fair use, especially if you're willing to take things down. If somebody comes back and says, I want you to take it down, and you say, okay, then you're fairly protected. This is what my legal counsel at the University of Idaho has said. I encourage you, if you are in an institution with your own general counsel, to ask them, although no, when you ask them, you will also probably not get like black and white answers. Again, because the law is very gray, and generally general counsels tend to be pretty risk averse, which is, I think, it works against our general nature as librarians and stewards of information to say, no, we should be as protective as possible, when what we want to do is share the information. And that can be really hard. You get some friction there. No, you shouldn't provide a copy to them. Okay, well then why am I holding on to 200,000 linear feet of material if I'm not supposed to give copies of it away? It's not doing me personal good, right? So that can be a really challenging, discussing, Ross was talking about the forms and how you want to go away from forms, and in the end your forms get longer. Our deed of gift, which is how people donate to us in our archive, went from 1 page to about 3 pages, because we are specifically asking about copyright, and not copyright so that we can reproduce for a monetary value, but copyright because we will often get people finding our images online and wanting to publish them in their own work, in a book, on their website, on their YouTube channel. And unless the University of Idaho created it, we probably don't own the copyright on it. And that's really challenging. So often what we have to tell people is, we don't own the copyright. you can have this digital copy, but we're giving it to you under fair use, understanding that you're using it for research. If you choose to use it for anything other than your personal research, it's incumbent upon you to get the right copyright. There's a really great kind of copyright cheat sheet that Oregon State created as a LibGuide. So if you look for like Oregon State LibGuide copyright, you'll find it. And there's I found it really useful. It's got a table that's sort of like, if you can check things on this side of the column, then you're probably in fair use. If you check things on this side, you're probably violating copyright. It can at least be a place to start from. And then how to present digital versions of physical materials. It does take a lot of policy development. So again, it's like our form that I was just talking about. I have found that artwork is a little different and is treated differently in terms of copyright than say like somebody's personal letters. And so it's just like sort of complicated, and unfortunately, sometimes we have to learn by making mistakes, but I do think there's research that you can do. And it's worth it because creating these digital exhibits is really, I mean, we reach thousands upon thousands more people each year because we have our materials online, and it drives them back to our repository. One really good example is the Barnard Stockbridge collection, which is a 200,000 plus image collection of photographs from the Silver Valley, the North Idaho mining district that were taken between the late 19th and mid 20th century. We've got about 3,000 of the images online, but we have, you know, as I said, like 200,000 actually in our collection. So people find that, and then they can contact us and say, gosh, I'm looking for this. Do you have anything else about this? Because it's going to be another decade before we can have all of that digitized. And we've got a lot of other priorities. So if you want to go to the next slide. So this is that collection builder platform that I was telling you about. My colleagues would be crabby with me if they knew that I gave this presentation without giving a little shout out to Collection Builder. We're really proud of it here in our library. It is actually the platform that the Digital Library of Idaho is built on, is Collection Builder. It is not simple, you know, my very technologically savvy colleagues are like, it's easy, it's static web, it's just writing code. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's way more complicated than my simple brain can like easily absorb. But once you understand it, it does get easier. But there's a lot of supports from the team that does Collection Builder that can help if you're interested in learning more about this. I just encourage you to maybe look at the University of Idaho's sites to see if there are things there that are of interest, and you like the look of it, then you might want to learn more. And I think that was all I had prepared, but I'd love to take questions or answer questions, or yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. So if folks in the audience have any questions for Ross or Dulcie, now is the time. I was trying to add in the links as you go, and then Ross added one as well, which is great. So thank you for that. Dulcie, I mean, this is going to be a hard question because there's so many things in the collection, but do you have like a particular favorite sort of collection or like item in a collection, or that the University of Idaho Library has?
So I probably, so for like almost 10 years, I worked for the Latah County Historical Society, and Latah County is where the University of Idaho is. So I'm still sort of in the same place, just in a little bit different venue. So we have quite a few collections that are about local history. And so they feel very home-like to me. I'm not from here originally, but I've lived here long enough that I know a lot of the family names. And there's this great photo collection that, you know, I really want to see turned into a digital gallery, a digital collection. They're the photo proofs, like the negatives and things from the local drugstore that also employed a photographer for years. And so the collection is like baby pictures, wedding photos, pictures taken for the local newspaper, downtown street scenes, like all this sort of material that's just so rich with like everyday life experiences. And there are like a lot of family photos that I don't know, maybe people don't have anymore, and they're just negative sitting in our collection. And so that's another like beautiful thing about digital collections, is that you can really reconnect people to the material that belongs to them. Like, I firmly believe we are just the stewards of this material. We are not the owners of it, and we should be doing everything we can to connect people. Similarly, I think that's why the Barnard Stockbridge is so important to have digitized, because so much of that material is really everyday life in Wallace and in Kellogg and in Kingston and like all these little towns along the 90 corridor in North Idaho. And when it came here to the university in the 80s, I think, people were kind of sad that it left their community. And while it's only an 1.5 or 2 hour drive down here, there are a lot of people who are just not going to come to Moscow to look at it. So having the ability to we are probably the best repository to be caring for it, because we have the resources to keep it temp controlled and maintain it over time. But giving people the access to the material that truly belongs to their community is another really powerful reason, I think, to invest in digital collections.
Thanks. Yeah, that's a great answer. So we got a question. How do newspapers share photographs with the university or state archives? If you wanted to find an original photograph that was in a newspaper, how does one track it down?
You know, the beauty of our great country is that our press is independent. And therefore, every newspaper does something a little bit different, you know, for good and for bad. So like in our community, the Moscow Pullman Daily News has sort of been the dominant news source for the last, I don't know, 40 or 50 years. It's a consolidated paper, and there used to be some other papers. Since they have had a staff photographer, they have maintained at their newspaper location collections, and every so often they would donate them. Depending on who did the donation, if it was the photographer or the editor at the time, they might have given photos to this repository, the university. But when I worked at the Historical Society 5 minutes away, we also had a pretty significant collection of photos that had been donated, just from a different time period. So sometimes these collections get split if there's multiple repositories that might reasonably take it. Since we've changed to digital photos, basically almost nobody has them unless the newspaper's been really diligent about transferring them. Historically, you know, a lot of these newspapers did not employ a photographer of their own. You know, our community newspapers, they did not. And so they use things like the photographer at the drugstore to take some of these pictures that then they would print. So that is all to say, you have to like track them down paper by paper, unfortunately. And at a certain point, they go into public domain, just like most photographs. You know, the threshold right now is like what, 1934 or 1935, something like that. After that, it might technically still be owned by the newspaper, and you'd have to ask for permission, unless you can find a copy of it someplace else. I'm not sure if that totally answered the question, but.
She says, thank you. Yes, it does. Wonderful. Were there any other questions for Ross and Dulcie while we have them here?
I'll ask, can I ask Ross a question?
Mm-hmm.
Have you thought, Ross, about like themed gallery shows or having like students curate the shows?
No, actually, I haven't considered that. So what do you mean by themed? Like,
so like if there was an anniversary coming up on campus or a special event, having like a call for artwork specifically around some sort of theme. I know we hosted, this was back when I was at the Historical Society, we hosted one of the Museum on Main Street programs for the Humanities Council runs these Smithsonian traveling exhibits. And so it was going to be in our community. And our community, our city of Moscow actually runs a plein air painting competition every year. And so we added like a special category of best historical plein air painting during that to sort of promote the exhibit that was coming. And then we offered a cash prize for the best artwork. So anyway, just thinking about like would the library be willing to contribute a cash prize to the best student artwork around an Earth Day topic or something like that, just to like maybe drive creation of pieces or interest in being involved. And that could be an opportunity for like a student group to be involved. So if there's a sustainability committee, you know, they're working on a new show for April that has that focus. I don't know. Best use of recycled materials.
Oh man, no, that's so cool. I actually was part of a show that did that. It was a hotel putting on an art show that the artist had to use like I guess unused stuff from the hotel. So anything like pillowcases, papers, wine corks. Yeah, it was really fun. So no, I never thought about that. I think the cash prize is a nice one. At least it would incentivize folks to submit stuff and be a part of that. And yeah, the student-led show I think is a good idea. I was talking to my director about she went to, and it's interesting because like you hate to generalize or use archetypes, but at the same time, if you're marketing to folks within a certain generation or demographic, you kind of have to. But she was talking about Gen Z really wanting to direct their own programming rather than coming to events that were made for them. And so I think the student-led shows, I think that's a great idea as well. Yeah, and this is why I love it. There's so many ways these projects can dovetail. So yeah, I appreciate that. And yeah, I wanted to add too, in talking with Dulcie about copyright, there's a lot of ways to approach it. And so there's ways to simplify it. And so I think what she was talking about, having sort of a disclaimer online about images, instead of maybe having, a form to fill out for folks, I can say, hey, this is X, Y, and Z, this is so-and-so's image. It's incumbent upon the person who's using it to go through the proper channels, right? And so hopefully, if you want to use it, you will have the information. You can provide that to the person who's wanting to use it, and the artist is okay with you sharing their contact information with folks. And yeah, one thing I learned too was that in my position putting on this gallery is you almost end up like educating folks about copyright. A lot of people don't know about it. Even fair use, I was talking to one of the photographers and she was kind of like flabbergasted, like, oh my God, this is a thing. People can just use my image, like as long as it falls within these parameters. I'm like, yeah, I mean, it's kind of how it works. And so it's an interesting experience, a learning curve for sure. And then within that learning curve, you might engage in some education yourself. So yeah, it's important stuff. And people then realize that copyright is essential to library shows. So.
There's a question in the chat about if we know of anyone locally that has more music themed archives of like local bands or genres or venues, especially with in the Treasure Valley, there's this local music event called Tree Fort. My cat is joining this webinar. And, just wondering, like, is there an archive of those posters and stuff or anything like that?
So I would say Boise is a terrific example of split archives because you have the state archive there, which is technically supposed to be archiving the history of all of Idaho, but because of its location, it also documents a lot of Boise and the Treasure Valley's history. You have BSU, and BSU has an archive just like the University of Idaho does. And so BSU ends up with some materials. And then you have the city of Boise, which has its own arts and history department. And they maintain an archive. So, and this is going to be true in a lot of bigger communities. There's going to be multiple organizations working. And depending on the personalities of the people involved, they work well together or they get very territorial, which is too bad, I think. In my opinion, I think there's enough old stuff to go around. But sometimes people get real excited about keeping their things just theirs. So I would say City of Boise, BSU, and the state archives would be places to look in the Treasure Valley. And then of course, there are there are county historical societies throughout sort of Southwest Idaho that might also maintain some things depending on what their collection scope is.
I'll add to here in Twin Falls, we have a Highway 30 Music Fest is an annual thing here. And I know just from driving around town, there's like a brick and mortar like business that, they take care of everything there. So my guess is, yeah, those folks might have access to some of this stuff. And if not, they would probably be able to point you in the right direction. But yeah, certainly finding that point of contact is very important. And it's nice if there's an actual place you can go.
That's a really great point that you make, Ross, and it makes me think that if you have an organization or an event or something that's important, a nonprofit in your community, and you come to find that their collections are being housed in somebody's basement or attic, because that's how it works. And they've been involved for 30 years and they've just been the collector of all the materials, or it passes along with every secretary, whatever it is. Sometimes having a gallery show or helping them create an online collaborative collection can be a good first step to getting them to ultimately donate it to a repository where it's more available to the public. So partnering to say like, hey, let's do a display about the Highway 30 Music Festival, a physical one, let's show posters, whatever it is. And then once they're there, you say, we could archive these here. You can have access to them whenever you need, but you also don't have to worry if your basement floods that they're going to be lost. So that's a good sort of like half step towards getting maybe a really important donation in your community of historic materials.
That's a really great suggestion. Yeah, because those documents and those records would be much safer in an archive or in a library, where we have a little bit more control over the climate and doesn't flood or burn down.
And also we often field questions, right? We become the people who are answering reference requests about the history of our community. And so we can also do the service of helping them rather than saying, well, you got to contact Mrs. Smith about this and then make an appointment to go to her house and she has to deal with you. We're already paying people to answer research requests. We could help you we could provide that service. That's how I try to frame it with folks. Like, they will be safe here. You will always have access to them. And also you don't have to deal with troublesome people asking you questions.
Which is like the best service.
Yeah, we did that recently. So our Moscow food co-op's if you've been to Moscow, you've probably been to the food co-op. It's been around, it's 50 this year. And they brought us a whole run of their newsletters, their physical newsletters, and they wanted them digitized for their 50th anniversary so people could read them online. So we got the full run of them. We were able to add to our archive, and also they don't have to figure out how to digitize 50 years worth of paper records and then make them available on their grocery store website, basically.
Yeah, which is not built for that kind of thing.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
This person mentions a DC punk rock archive that's held within the People's Archive at the DC Public Library. That'd be awesome. Yeah, I know that the Boise Public Library has a little bit of a historical archive as well, up on the 3rd floor. So that might be, and they sort of collect more, it seems like they sort of collect more regional Boise area history. So I wonder if that might be a place to start as well.
Yeah, that's a great point, Annie. I forgot about the public library.
And tangential, the Albertsons Library at Boise State University, they have a zine collection, which is like up at the edge, maybe over the top of punk rock a little bit, especially the zines from the 90s. So that might be a little bit of a research place to start looking for some of those historical punk bands in Boise.
We could do a whole nother webinar on community-driven archiving, which is definitely growing, and people are understanding this is a way to sort of decolonize the archiving process, which has for a long time been very much dominated by very specific people deciding what is and is not important to keep, and really trying to democratize the process of what gets saved in these public institutions. And there's a lot of really interesting writing out there about the need to be responsive to communities, to support community archiving, to come alongside and maybe not say, well, you have to, of course, I just said it's safer in a place like this, but if people want to keep it in their community, can we be good helpers to make sure that they have the tools and the skills that they need so that they can archive it in the place that they feel is the best for their families and communities.
Nice.
That's cool
Well,
to know Boise Public, yeah, made it a more public site. That's cool.
yeah, it's up on the 3rd floor and you don't need an appointment to see it, which is very exciting. I've been in there. There's some really excellent photographs. Well, we are coming up on noon, so I want to be cognizant of folks' time. So thank you to Ross and Dulce so much for presenting. This was really, really excellent. I really appreciate you. As folks exit the webinar, you're going to get a survey, and we always appreciate your honest feedback. And other than that, I hope you all have an excellent afternoon.
Thanks so much, Annie.
Thank you.